Hello my fellow readers, today I'm going to talk about The Saint's Magic Power is Omnipotent, volumes 3 and 4. I think I talked about volume 2 at some point, I hope I did, but it's a little hard to remember at this point, but I'm pretty sure I did, because I think I read it for one of the monthly things. Anyway, quickly I'll just go through this. They're probably going to be a little bit blended together because I went pretty quickly from one to the next, so I don't really remember precisely where one ended and one began. Let me read the backs quickly, and then I'll go over what I thought about the volumes themselves. From the back of volume 3, it says she can't hide from herself. The saint's unique magic dwells within Say, though she lacks the full control and doesn't know why. She finds distraction in the sanctuary for rare herbs, where she can indulge her real passions. But the truth always catches up with Say in the end, and this time it will come through the words of the former saint herself. And then volume 4 continues with Dark Heart of the Forest. At long last, Say knows how to control the power of the saint that resides within her, which means it's time to wield it. She must cleanse the forests of Klausner's domain, or her new friends will never again know peace and prosperity. But Say's first foray into the forest depths nearly end in disaster, while she and the knights await reinforcements from the capital. Say has to wonder, what if the saint's magic isn't enough? What must she be ready to sacrifice to save the people of Klausner? So, the biggest thing in this is that Say is now officially the saint, even though sometimes she tries to travel and hide the fact that she's the saint. She is now fully recognized as the saint. And in this volume, which is volume 3, she's trying to figure out how she can fully use her saint's magic. Like, she's done it before, but she doesn't know what the trigger is in order to get it to work. And they end up traveling to this land where she works with a herbologist. And to some degrees, it's fine. I think what they come to find out, if I'm not mistaken, is that in this land they had a saint there, and the saint did a lot of work, but the saint is now gone, of course, has passed away. But they had pretty much purged all records of the saint. I can't remember why, that's still stuck in my head, but they did have one record left of the saint. There was a secreted away journal, and so Say is given the opportunity to look at that journal and try to discover the parallels between her and the former saint, and maybe how she can get her power to work. And she does discover the secret. That, of course, is what happens in volume 4. But I think, 1, she's a little bit surprised by that, but 2, it's not that surprising how she can get it to work if you followed along with the book and you see the scenarios of when she can actually be fully the saint. A lot of the rest of the book is really just a slow story, for both sides, actually, I'll say. This is a very slow-moving, soft, cozy fantasy, and in a lot of the volumes, I don't remember so much if in 4, because I think in 4 they really are dealing with the whole forest and trying to purge it and clean it, and so she worries a lot about the people the soldiers, I should say, but the people who are going there to fight the monsters and clear the forest. She worries a lot, so that's more in this one. This one, though, there are those kind of food breaks that the story does, and I think in this one she learns about a new grain and remembers some of the food that she had in Japan, and trying to find a way that she can share foods that she loved and enjoyed back in her life in the world as we know it. How can she get similarities in this new fantasy world? Can she make pasta? Can she do all of these food dishes that she enjoyed then, but in this new life? And this comes up again in volume 5, which I also completed, but I'm not going to talk about that right now. But again, it's very much like the food thing. It's talking about cooking and herbs. And for this world, they've always used herbs as a medicine, and it's always been medicinal. And Say is trying to teach the world that it can also be used for food. But of course, her being the saint, even when she's using these herbs for food, the fact that they are magical or given properties for healing and magic in this world, when she uses them on the food, as the saint, they become an overpowered food as well, and they often have magical attributes to them. So that happens a bit in here. I will say, too, this series is one of the slowest of slow burn romances ever. Usually in each volume you have sprinkled throughout bits and pieces between her and Albert, but like that their relationship will be endgame. They'll end up together. They're very, very close to one another, but it is such a slow burn. There's been no real outright confession or admittance with either of them, but at the same time you see the little movements and progression bit by bit. There was more again in volume 5, especially as Say is taking on the role of Saint in 5, which again I didn't really want to talk about, but I'll just mention this quickly. It becomes also the fact that she is Saint now. It's kind of a pressure to kind of woo her. All the different Ariels will want to obtain Say and her abilities, and so guys who are free and can pursue a wife are kind of interested in pursuing Say and getting her along. So I think that's interesting. I also think it's interesting because obviously from very early on there's been the close relationship between her and Albert, so you're kind of hoping that they're going to keep pushing forward together. Again, I'll just quickly on 4. 4 is pretty much the whole trying to purify an area and really use her powers as a saint. There are times of success and times where she gets frustrated with her ability, but that's really her main goal. I don't remember which one I was holding up. This is 4. Anyway, it's really like this pressure on her to be able to release that power of the saint because she has this immense power. But how can she truly get it working and purify these zones that have issues? And I don't think they've really addressed if there's a why this is happening in the land that they need the saint. Maybe we're still working toward that. I guess too, like sometimes even if they've talked about it, that for me that ends up getting buried in all of the little stories, like, just Say's discovery of cooking and herbs and everything. I guess for me, even if it did talk about it, it's been buried. It's kind of like how I remember about the journal and everything, and that is important. And the story that is told about the saint there is important in the fact that it's impacting Say and how could Say learn to be more of the saint. But at the same time, like if there were other discussions, I don't remember it clearly. Like it just kind of falls away. Plus, I think to some degree, if you're rooting for a pairing, you're also kind of just looking for those moments of the pairing and hoping that something happens. And that's also how I'm rating this, because I really, I want to see sweet moments between her and Albert. But there's always a lot of her and all of the other characters in the story. She gets a lot with, is it Yuri? There's a couple of different guys. Like, I think it is Albert's brother that she calls Four Eyes. I think. But there's a lot of like other characters that come into play here, and I don't know, sometimes I get lost in all of them and trying to keep track of them, and especially when I'm also following other stories and sometimes there's similar lines in it. But I do think that this is one of my favorite ones, especially for like the cozy angle. Cozy fantasy wise, I think these are really good. I think in some of the other ones that I also love, like Seventh Time Loop, that one has a bit more episodic but solid storyline, and that like they're all different. I'll just say that. Like I almost feel like Seventh Time Loop is less cozy. Like this is much more cozy. You get those snippets of like just cooking and having a tea party and relating to other characters. Like bits of here, you'll get to see the other saint who is not the saint. But she herself has like all of these other, like she's very powerful. So it's understandable also how they might not have known right away. I agree with the whole thing that, they shouldn't have mistreated Say. They should have tested both of them out to find out who the actual saint was. That is a problem, not power. That's a problem that the prince had, and he got in trouble for it. So, I mean, I guess that's fine, but I always think that's weird. Like, he just jumped the gun in poor Say and poor country. And now they're trying to catch up with that. So, I don't know. I like the series. I'm still following along with it. I will continue to go forward. Lately, I've been enjoying the audiobooks of these, so they do have an audiobook available. I think their audiobook line is Seven Seas Siren, and Veronica Taylor, who I believe is Say's voice actress for the anime, if I'm not mistaken, but she narrates the books, and it's a really good audiobook, so I would recommend that if you don't want to just sit and read the light novel, or do it together. That's my favorite thing, is you do the audio and the book together, and it just makes a delightful time, and you stay caught up with it. I also still love the manga for The Saint's Magic Power is Omnipotent. That's why I say when I say this is one of my favorites, it honestly is. I like the story, I love the characters, I love the slow burn. Like, luckily I am a slow burn fan, but I would not mind a little bit more progression with this than where it is. You know, now I'm at volume 5, there's still a lot of volumes left to go, so I don't know. Maybe there'll be more progression soon, but I've also seen the anime, and I don't remember where the anime left off, but I feel like all around, you know, it's still that slow burn fantasy vibe. I like it, I'm okay with it. Like I said, I wouldn't mind if it was a little bit faster. A little bit. But I think it's good, and I can't help but continue to recommend it. So, you know, if I've gotten this far into the series and I still enjoy it, that means it's a pretty solid series. I would definitely recommend picking it up. Again, if you're not so much into the slow burn fantasy, maybe this wouldn't work for you, but I do think it's worth it. I like all the characters. Sometimes I forget which character I'm dealing with, and then Say reminds me. I think, if I'm not mistaken, in the beginning of 5, the audiobook, she actually recapped each of the other volumes before the new volume actually began, which helped a lot. So if you're worried about that, like especially if you have little breaks in between reading, which I did, luckily they do kind of recap you so that you're not completely lost in the woods. So I think that's good. But for the most part, Say is really just progressing. She's trying to learn her power as the saint. She is slowly building her relationship with Albert. She's building her relationships with other people, either at the castle or, I mean, technically, I think they would all be considered at the castle, but in the nobility and in the magic realm in general, she's building her way. I remember in the manga, I think it was the events of volume 3, that I was a little bit bored with. It sounds awful, but there's like the herbologist character that she meets and is interacting with. And I remember when I was reading the manga, I was just like, it's not that I don't care. But I think it was like, if this takes away from the building and budding relationship between Albert and Say, I'm going to be a little bit sad. Because I'm like, I don't feel like she really needs to sit there. Like, we don't need volumes wasted on this area. And it seems like they didn't as much do that for the light novel. So, I don't know what it was, but I just remember having that feeling. And I was like, I don't need this. So, we'll see. I actually need to see if I'm caught up with the manga now that I'm getting there with the light novel. I need to remember, like, where I am and move forward again. Because, again, I enjoy all versions of this story. So, that is it for this video. Recommend reading. Until next time. Bye.